Do you want to hear something funny? So, and this is again a Chad bitch, not a. So, basically, the two vendors that basically have been yelling and doing the whole vCenter plugin stuff the loudest have been us and NetApp, right? But again, you know, if you're using 3PAR's got a really good plugin. If you're using EqualLogic's got a pretty good plugin, right? So, again, this is not a vendor thing, right? But in the early days, the first version of our plugin was view only. In other words, the VMware team had the ability to see but not touch, right? And an analyst, as you know, as they're watching the battle between us and NetApp, always came to me and said, "You guys don't do provisioning." And I'm like, every time I go to a big customer and say, "We'd like the VMware team to do provisioning," they have a giant hissy fit, right? Because they go, "No, it's like church and state,
yeah.
Right? They're isolated, done, right?" So in other words, we were like, we can't do something that allows the VMware team to provision until we can demonstrate either roles-based access control or some fencing, you know, so the VMware team can't go crazy, right? But can play in their sandbox, right? The weird thing, though, is that is now out there. You can do that, right? But I think the problem is that even it's such a long conversation to explain to them, look, you want to enable self-service for the VMware admin. Storage team, you can keep happy because you can have this carved-out pool with very strict access controls, very well-defined. But it hits that just instinctual no.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to do it because
but it's not only for example, the storage team and the security guys, but also the auditors themselves.
Yeah.
And there are still a lot of different ISO certificates that say, okay, if you do this job, you should only do this job, and the rest you may not touch.
The last, yeah.
And then you're doing such a thing that is defying the rules in such a way. But yeah, companies need to have those specific types of certification. And we did it, like you said. We had the viewer installed, and then the auditor came. He said, well, this is not according to the rules.
So you're telling me that you use the storage viewer?
Yeah, from EMC storage
and
viewer.
The auditor said you're not allowed to do it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's not in my line of work, and in a way, I can understand him, because those rules are set up for a specific way.
So by the way,
it doesn't account for your new role.
No, it does not account for my new role, but my role is growing, and the rules are lacking behind.
Yeah,
so what will you do as a company?
The last thing in the world to change is the bureaucratic rules that
okay,
all around
but
us.
you need to have those those rules to be able to show your customers that you are certified of doing things in a specific way.
So you know what's going to be crazy?
Yeah, it is crazy.
But where it's going to get crazier, right, is the path for VMware in future vSphere releases is to increasingly do natively what currently requires plugins and extensions, right? Right? So that's an interesting one. I'm going to take this video when you post it, and I'm going to take it over to the product team and go, wow, we better make sure that we build in some sort of like roles-based access division auditability. Otherwise, there's these barriers that, man, I don't think we're perhaps getting adequate.
Well, there is a way around it, and I asked the auditor that same question. For example, if you use SRM, you start using those small control runs for doing the array-based actions, for failing over, and that is not a problem, because you don't have a direct connection from something that you need to configure to a host that does array configuration. So it's stupid, but...
So, Mike, did you hear what he just said? You know, the weird thing is, so the thing that's funny is the biggest problem is tons of coolness that's possible, we just don't use it. There's a huge debate going on about gateway length. So for those of you that don't know what he's talking about, one array on the planet still requires in-band communication. So it doesn't get managed via an IP address, it gets managed by communication over a LUN, which is a symmetrics, right? And everyone looks at it and they're like, that's so weird. Right? Even I look at it and I'm like, that's weird. I'm used to like, I manage any device by opening an IP address and some sort of thing. And I'm going, SIM team, we've got to start basically going, native IP connectivity. And they're like, Chad, you're not hearing us. The big customers dig the fact that this host over here, either physical or a VM, but that host is the only host that is allowed to pass communication. But yeah, so that's
a little backwards from what we're using here.
Yeah.
But that's just the exciting part of having auditors come in and talk to you.
That is frustrating.
Yes, I know.
interesting. That's an interesting example. The other one that was interesting here was I am the storage team, and configuring storage is frustrating. What's frustrating about it? What's frustrating about it? Too hard?
No, there is too much to do, a lot of things to do. Probably is a point similar to the point number 9.
Yeah.
Because the storage team has a lot of work to do to
the
answer
basics.
to the demand of VMware people. The validation team is a great demander of, he asks a lot of things, a lot of space, a lot of feature to storage people.
When you have these same sort of sessions, but where it's the storage team, like so we're having a customer council and it's a storage discussion, they hate VMware admins. They hate VMware teams. Because the reasons they hate them is not because they hate them individually, right? But the requests come in with a much higher rate of frequency,
Yes.
right, than they're used to in the physical world. Right? And they're like, damn it, why won't they just take what I give them and not come back for another 4 months? The one thing I was surprised about in this, if you go to the next slide, I think I actually I did a public survey. One thing that was interesting was, one thing that you guys didn't highlight that people externally said were big problems is dealing with the cost of storage. Many people said, it's a constant source of frustration, or it makes me want to poke my own eyes out. Right? And the other one that was a big heavy hitter was figuring out how much we're going to use. Those didn't pop up near the top of the list. Like I always hear people saying the cost of storage is blocking my virtualization project. You guys don't find that as much?
I think for many of us at least, we may be consultants or something like that. So the customers already paid for it by the time we get in.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. What about the capacity utilization question? Like, I'm always really surprised that people don't use the vCenter, managed data store reporting feature. Like, look, there's tons of tools that EMC does and other people do, and there's some really cool ones from like vKernel and tons of examples. We could give boatloads that show you capacity utilization. But heck, even if you're not going to use any of those things, why don't you just go into vCenter and say, here's my utilization, here much is spent on snapshots. A lot of customers don't realize how much they can do just natively. At least that's been my experience.
It is very true, Chad. I visit a lot of customers who, when I'm there, see that screen for the first time. So it's sort of related to your other question about all those cool features that you don't use. That would be one of those.
Okay, cool. Interesting dialogue. Okay, let's keep on trucking. And I want to make sure that we've got enough time to just do an open Q&A. You can just ask me anything you want, right? Which of the features he listed here are the most important to you today, right? vCenter plugins, array snapshots or clones, thin provisioning, compression, deduplication, solid state, and here I said it could be a cache, like a big cache, useful for VDI type stuff, or auto-tiering type models. Auto-tiering itself is a feature, storage array quality of service, VMware quality of service, specifically storage I/O control, or other. Again, this data will make it immediately back to various product teams. Okay, forget that. We're not going to do that. We're just going to do this. All right, we're at 16 and one person left, so, we're looking to get, oh, there we go. Okay, 24, fantastic. Let's see. This is very exciting. Oh, wow.
That is not going to help the
Different
product.
products.
So let's go.
Okay, so the one that was the biggest was dedupe, but marginally, right? So why dedupe? And what does dedupe mean to you, out of curiosity? Does it mean backup targets, production targets?
I think I'd be a bit careful about ever using dedupe for primary production. I'd have to see proof first that there's any real performance cost.
So the primary storage dedupe, an area where, again, each vendor does certain things sooner or later that's usually related to the underlying architectural decisions that were made in eons past, right? Was NetApp predominantly, right? And every vendor's implementation is very, very different of all of these things. So it's very difficult to kind of make large-scale comparisons. But I will say this, I see a lot of customers using primary storage dedupe. And, obviously the answer of, is there a performance impact is so, such a complex, it depends. Post-process, inline, these all work differently. But in general, there are ways to use dedupe successfully without big performance issues. The one thing that I do see all the time personally, though, that drives me a little batty is people who are storage noobs, like newbies, right, non-experts, right, measure storage in gigabytes, and storage vets measure it in IOPS, right? And what often happens is people go and they go, if I dedupe this, I can use less. And the answer is you might be able to use less, but maybe you can't use less. And sometimes you're gated more by the IOPS dimension of a problem than you are the capacity dimension. I tried to do something, but it totally failed. Where I was like, there are 3 dimensions of storage efficiency, right? One is a capacity, dollars per gigabyte. The other one is a dollars per IOP. And then there's a dollars per change. In other words, flexibility. How important is the ability to do non-disruptive change? Because if you can't do non-disruptive change, that means you over-design in the first place, which means you're paying more. And all of those things are economic, but people don't think about that. They think gigabytes.
I think one of the reasons why I say what I do is that I am a consultant. So what I do is I go out, I configure something, and then I promise to support it afterwards. But I do not necessarily know everything there is to know about the customer's environment.
Yeah.
If I were the end user, the storage guy or the VMworld guy, I would probably try to use Dedupe because it would be a lot easier for me to get out of a problem situation if it arises. I just call myself.
That's an interesting idea, calling yourself. I see your point. I will say this, guys. I think you should expect, as consultants, since we have this distribution of consultants and some customers here, out of curiosity, who here were customers again? Raise your hand. So customers, to you, which is the most important? You can only pick one.
Dedupe.
Dedupe?
QoS. 8. QoS.
So QoS, I've got one QoS, I got one dedupe.
The solid state.
One.
The Octo Series
Those are linked ideas, right?
But what I'm saying, dude, no way primary. I'd be looking just on the basis of the margin you'd be saving. I just wouldn't take the risk on performance. I'd be just looking purely on backup, inline.
Fascinating.
It just wouldn't. I mean, okay, I'll see something like NetApp, and you're looking at, dare I say, mid-range storage stuff. If I'm working in an enterprise arena, I'm not going to be deduping my data warehouse, and taking that over because I'll just get killed. I'll get P1s coming out my ears.
So, just for what it's worth, guys, right? In the deep in the bowels of Hopkinton and Santa Clara and Austin and all the places where the people design this stuff. The march towards storage efficiency and all of these crazy technologies is so fast and furious, right? That but clearly we're gonna have a go-to-market problem, right? Rather than just a technology problem, because the skepticism that I can hear about so many things, right? So, for example, again, I'm trying to androgynize this, right? Make it even, right? In Intel's next. In the Westmere EX-based chip, there's a bunch of additional instructions that are extremely useful for compression and dedupe, right? Very fast at doing compares and hash, the